All right, greetings and welcome to, this is going to be lecture 3 on April 20th, and we're talking about preaching and preparing for your application of your text into an actual message that you're going to be preaching and then posting on Facebook so that we can all watch it. If you go a little further down in your PowerPoints, you're going to see a PowerPoint that says from hook to house, and this is something that I want to really hone in and maybe give you some handles in terms of how you get into your textual preparation for preaching. So we've talked about exegesis being the hard work of exploring the text and hermeneutics being the art of making sense. Homiletics is the means by which homiletics is the means of making what makes sense matter from the pulpit. So we've made sense of the text. Now it's a means of making that matter to the people that are listening. Now, one of the key questions that you want to ask when you are about to preach a message is, where do I want us to arrive? Okay, that is a question that too often pastors don't ask. Where do I want to take these folks? So oftentimes, and this is crazy, I know, but I will draw a house on my paper that I'm writing my sermon, and I will write next to it, this is where I want us to arrive. I will know when we've landed. So too often pastors, when they get to preaching, they just start and they hope they land somewhere and they end up landing nowhere. I think you need to start with the end in mind. I think you need to have an understanding that this is the destination. This is the outcome. This is my hoped for objective in preaching this message. This is what I want them to learn, glean, experience, and apply. I can name it and it's clear, because then everything else I do will be moving towards that destination. And so in terms of how you start, you've done the exegesis, you've done the hard work, you've explored the text, and you have in your mind a hunch that this is what I would do with this, and this is where I think it lands. This is the overall heartbeat of this message that I want to preach. If you can remember back to when Pastor Robbie preached to us, the woman at the well, she wanted us to understand that Jesus is a barrier breaker. Like, everything pointed towards that. And so she had in her mind, after reading the text, that for this text, I'm going to talk about Jesus being the barrier breaker. And then everything sort of moves in that direction. And she didn't just pick that. That was the result of the work of exegesis that she did. And I think that's important for us. We don't just pick where we want to land. We say, where does the text land? And then name it so that everything can move towards that. The house is the landing spot. It's the arrival point. If you don't know why the text matters, it won't matter to them. And that's part of what we need to keep in mind in the process of our exegesis and hermeneutics. That when we begin to explore why this matters, it starts to matter for the people that we preach to. Now, if you go down one more on your PowerPoint, it says you can't do everything, okay? Now, you've put a lot of hours and a lot of work into your exegesis. You're not going to be able to say everything that you learned, okay? Some stuff you won't say. Some really good stuff you won't say. In fact, I used to have a person say that you're going to leave a bunch of stuff laying on the floor that you wish you could have brought into the sermon, but you can't. Now, all of that is going to add richness and texture to your sermon, but it doesn't mean you're actually going to say it. All of that intricate work that you've done in word studies and explorations into the world behind the text, it may add a richness and a depth to what you say, but you don't have to say it. You don't have to say, I read in a biblical commentary about this and yada, yada, yada. You don't have to say those things, because that stuff's going to come out in the way you preach. Some stuff you'll want to say, but don't say it because you don't need to. Leave some stuff for next time. Now, remember, this is one of the challenges for a lot of people as they start to preach. You're going to get to do this again. And so you don't have to say everything you know in one sermon. In fact, don't. I did that once. One of my first sermons that I preached, I actually had my pastor come to me and say, boy, you gave us everything you knew today, 45 minutes in. And so one of the things that I want to remind us to do is recognize we get to do this again. We get to come back at a different time, and that will help us to find a little bit of peace of knowing when to stop talking. Choose the rifle shot approach versus the shotgun blast approach. Rifle shot is one bullet, straight down line. Like, pick a path and stay on that path. Shotgun blast is full of these little pellets, and so when you shoot a shotgun cartridge, it explodes and pellets go everywhere. That's how a lot of times people preach. They They pick a text and they just kind of shoot and they blast out and they just hope something lands. And you may walk away with occasionally from a preacher going, yeah, I don't know that I really understood the fullness of the message, but I got a couple good nuggets from it. No, we want to stay in a line. We want to take this this shot and really see it through. Don't feel like you have to say everything in one sermon. We've talked about that. Your 8-minute sermon will make you a more efficient and effective preacher because you will have to be intentional about what you say. I feel that if you can write a good 8 to 10 minute sermon, you'll be fine when it comes to 20, 25 minutes because then you're just filling it out. It's the 8 and 10 minutes that are often the toughest, and so I want to encourage you to work hard to write your 8-minute sermon. Choose your vehicle. This is the next part. Sermons, there are sermon formats that are helpful, and this isn't a homiletics class, so I'm not going to get into a bunch of them. But what I am going to encourage you to do is, as you're moving forward into your preaching, then you start to realize that I don't have to invent things. There are certain forms that help us moves that in a sermon, writing a sermon, I want to make moves where people can follow me on this journey. Like, understand that you've got a house, then you have to pick how you're going to get them from where you are to how you get them to the house. So what vehicle are you going to choose? So there's what's called the 4 pages of the sermon. A lot of times you'll talk in terms, when you talk about the 4 pages of the sermon, you'll say things like trouble in the text, trouble in the world, grace in the text, grace in the world. Or trouble in the text, trouble in the world, grace in the world, grace in the text. So you're going to name the trouble in the passage, then you're going to name how that applies to the world around you, then you're going to find grace in the passage and how God overcomes in the passage, and then you're going to apply that to the world around you. That's one format. The next format would be something like thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So you're going to name what you say, the challenges of that, and then you're going to bring those together. Situation, what's happening, complication, what difficulty has been created there, resolution, and then celebration. So we might say the situation is David has cheated with Bathsheba. That may be the situation. Complication, Nathan finds out. Resolution is Nathan challenges David based upon the use of a parable. Celebration, David repents. Now, you're going to walk through that story in an engaging way, making it relevant to the lives of those who listen. Running this story with windows. This is where you're actually going almost verse by verse. It's almost expository, but you're giving little pictures into it and applying it as you go. So some people choose to do running the story with windows. So they kind of walk through the story verse by verse and then give you little indications of how that fits within the contemporary life. You want to talk about in terms of making moves. So you're not writing a sermon like you would an essay. You want to understand how you engage people. So you want to make moves in there. So if you're writing an 8-minute sermon, you've got time for about 3 different moves, maybe 4, but they're short moves where you're inviting people to take a journey with you on how you arrive at the destination you want to get. But again, once you know your destination, everything about the journey pulls you towards that destination. You're not getting out here and taking rabbit trails and going down paths that you don't need to go. You're staying in tune with the destination that you've already chosen. Don't stress too much about knowing how to make moves right now. This isn't a homiletics class. This is a hermeneutics class. But I just wanted to give you some hooks and handles for you as you begin to write your sermon. And so the last slide is, what's your hook? You have about 30 seconds to a minute to get people's attention when you preach a sermon. And a lot of times preachers mismanage this. They start off with big, long, like, introductions and like, today I'm going to be talking to you about. No, find unique and creative ways to grab the attention of the people that are listening. So if I'm preaching out of the text of Isaiah 43, it's a message of hope. I might start to suggest something like, there she sat with her grandchild as he played around in the dust. The corner of her eye was a tear. And as she sat there reflecting upon her grandchild playing there in the dust, she thought, he has never known the joy that I once knew. So she reached down and she scoops him up. She brings him up into under her arms, and she begins to tell him the story the story of her people. A people that weren't always living in exile. A people who weren't always living in Babylon. People who once had a city, a glorious city, who had political power, military might, and economic stability. She tells a story, and then she reminds her son that the God who once did that is a God who could do it again. So something like that, where you want to bring them in, draw them in to the story, put them there, whether a story from your life, a story from someone else's life, a story from the world around us, or the story of the text. Set the hook, pull them in, and then take them to the house. So you hook them, you put them in the vehicle, and you take them to the house. Don't go up to the house and then pass by the house. Stop, open up the door, take them to the front door, and take them in. Too often we'll have an idea of where we arrive or where the destination is, and we get all the way up to the house, and then we just drive right on past. And we don't land the plane. You've got to land it. You've got to help us to know when you are finished, when you are done. So I would encourage you to do that. So that's just a few thoughts, 30 minutes worth of lectures on a little bit on homiletics. You'll get a lot more of that as you get into your training in your coursework, but I just wanted to give you a little bit as you're starting to think about how you're going to write your sermons for next week. Thanks.